Yo, I'm Matt,
And I'm Joel,
and
and
we're
we're
FringeCraft.
FringeCraft.
Today we're going to be watching a video, Majestic Documents Are Aliens Among Us. And in this video, Dr. Michael Heiser looks at the Majestic documents to see whether or not the information they contain is proof of alien beings. So we'll look at this, and I'm sure there will be a greater explanation as to what the Majestic documents are and, how they relate to aliens.
All right, guys, if you like this kind of content, check out Fringe Pop 321 channel, which we'll link below. It's Michael S. Heiser's channel. He does lots of informative content on, honestly, pretty similar stuff to what we cover, and it's all very well and thoroughly researched. And also, if you like this content, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below. We really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, give us a critique. Let us know what you think of the content. Whatever. Say hello. Just, comment. So, all right. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
Welcome to Fringe Pop 321, the show that believes the world is stranger than we think, but thinking should not be strange. Does the US government have proof that we've been visited by aliens? Now, many people assume that is the case. Short of a press conference from the East Wing, what would constitute proof for such an historic cover-up? Many would say, well, documents. Maybe that's already happened. I'm referring here to something called the Majestic documents. We need to talk about those. We should start with, what are the Majestic documents? Well, the Majestic documents, also known as the Majestic 12 documents, are a series of leaked documents that allegedly validate the existence of an above top secret government group known as Majestic 12, or MJ12 for short. Now, these are not Freedom of Information documents. Rather, they are leaked, and they have a truly sordid history that requires considerable explanation. Now, according to the website majesticdocuments.com, Operation Majestic 12, after which these documents were named, was created by a special classified presidential order on September 24, 1947, at the recommendation of Secretary of Defense James Forrestal and Dr. Vannevar Bush, the chairman of the Joint Research and Development Board. Majestic 12 was established in the wake of reports of UFOs and alleged UFO crashes, which were believed, say these documents, to be alien in nature. Now, specifically, the recovery of crashed objects in the state of New Mexico between July 4th and July 6th in 1947 caused the Chief of Staff of the Army Air Force's Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit to initiate a thorough investigation. Now, the IPU had been formed earlier in 1942 in response to two crashes in the Los Angeles area in late February of that year. The Majestic documents discuss the work of this group, Majestic 12, in regard to these crashes and subsequent UFO cases. They contain statements that the US government obtained alien bodies, extraterrestrial craft debris, and then hid that evidence from the public. Now, before we even get into, can we trust these documents as a good source of information, we need to first know about how in the world these documents actually surfaced. How were they leaked? Because again, as I mentioned earlier, these documents have a truly sordid history. Now, the story of the Majestic documents begins in 1984. UFO believer and film producer Jamie Shandera received an envelope that contained photographs of 8 pages of documents. Now, these were purported to be briefing papers describing Operation Majestic 12. They revealed a secret committee of 12, MJ-12, supposedly authorized by President Harry S. Truman in 1952.
So I believe this is a pretty popular conspiracy theory, and I think it's like written about in, the very popular conspiracy book, Behold a Pale Horse, written by William Cooper, who we've covered before, who I think is one of the, top conspiracy theorists of all times. And I like Dr. Michael Heiser's rational approach to, like, what is this? Where does this come from? Can we trust where it comes from? What is the seeming like goal of these documents? And I also think it kind of has some. We were talking about in our last video, where Lou Elizondo was talking to Fox News. Like, he brought up there were three possible, uh, I guess, uh, rationales to like what this was, like these UFO sightings, and one of them he said was like, well, it could be U.S. The United States government like having poor communication, and so like one part of the government sees something that another part of the government's doing and not telling people about, and so you have like, you know, this problem going on where ATIP is like looking at American craft and saying it's a threat or something, and then it could be foreign adversaries, like foreign either non-state actors or state actors, and meaning state actors like China or Iran or Russia, and non-state actors meaning something like ISIS or any name a terrorist organization, something like that, or the World Health Organization, that whatever. And I guess the third is that it could be something unexplainable like aliens or whatever.
Off-world.
And you brought up it could be fourth, it could be time traveling.
I'm just
Yeah, but part of the thing that I was bringing up is like, well, if it is, the U.S. government having this like lack of communication between itself, like different branches or whatever, it could also be that there's a level of government that is like so black budget, so deep state that the rest of the government isn't particularly allowed to know about it, or, most people within the government are, or they've been forgotten about or whatever. We've touched on it before. It could be like something like the Men in Black, or, it could be at this point, private military contractors that, actually take all this stuff and, they're the ones in control of it. And I say private military contractors, they don't even have to be military contractors, private contractors. And so I think that it's kind of like reasonable to get that from what he's saying these documents talk about. And MJ-12 and Majestic like being above top secret, like a classification that's so high that it's like only people within this deep state would know about it. And MJ-12 being this group of like high level scientists and government officials that they may work, you might have like an army general, 5-star general, 4-star general, whatever, and the highest levels of military, your joint chiefs of staff, or even like slightly lower generals who know about it, and they're just kind of off. It's like a side chain of command that isn't necessarily affected from the most top down hierarchy.
Parallel.
Exactly, which isn't, that's not intuitive because hierarchies don't typically work like that. But if you have something like this where it so changes kind of the fabric of our society, the government could choose to go down that line. Like where we've talked about it previous videos, like the Trump video, does the president even know about this? Do high level senators like know about this? High ranking senators. And, probably realistically, the president is looked at as someone who is pretty transient, as someone who at most is going to be there for 8 years and then gone. Whereas some of these deep state people, or the people who might, be running these organizations within the military or whatever, are there for 20 or 30 years, right? 40 years, a whole career, basically, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
And so they're not looked at as someone who's just gonna like get this knowledge and then be in a position to where, they give it out publicly.
Yeah, like, why do they have to even be subservient to the president at that point, except for, what the law says, or what it's not even in the law.
Exactly. Well, he's like the commander in chief, right? But if you have a whole section that it's like, well, that's not technically in the chain of command, so he's really not above you, so you don't have to, worry.
That's one possible way. I mean, I want to see what the document alleges. I'm actually not even that familiar with the Majestic 12. Like, I've heard of it. I've heard of these documents. I know that they were talked about on Joe Rogan, and we watched that documentary Above Majestic before.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've actually ever given a clean read of them.
Well, the idea even of saying like above Majestic is like above... Majestic is above Top Secret. So Top Secret is the one we know exists, right?
Mm.
So like above Top Secret being Majestic, right? That's something like, by the way, I think Q, the idea of QAnon and, Q is like within other departments, they don't say Top Secret or above Top Secret, they say like they have different number and letter categories, and that was the idea of QAnon. So, like, anyway.
Be careful saying that word on YouTube, by the way. Well, I mean...
I think you can broach this subject, but whatever. The idea... All I'm getting at is, that's the idea, is that there's these classification systems for these...
the intelligence, the secrecy levels.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the one that we were just talking about comes from like the Department of Energy or something. I don't even know how that'd be relevant, but the idea that something being above Top Secret is like, almost absurd. I mean, in the layman's culture, in the normal sense, probably like the average CIA officer or FBI agent or, someone in the high level intelligence service wouldn't even, like, they'd be like, that doesn't even exist. And so that's why these would be like so groundbreaking.
Oh, right? I see. Okay, that makes this very interesting.
So, okay, let's continue to look into this.
They gave the names of MJ-12 members, and they detailed the crash of an alien spacecraft at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. The documents further explained that bodies and alien technology were recovered and how the matter was concealed from the public. MJ-12, again this mysterious group, was tasked with exploiting the technology. Now, Shandera had two colleagues involved in studying the leaked documents, Stanton Friedman and William Moore. Shandera and Moore were later, in 1985, contacted by anonymous individuals about more information. They were led to discover what would become known as the Cutler-Twining Memo, again, part of the Majestic document cache as we know it now, while they were researching in the National Archives. And this is another sort of spy tale all of its own. Shandera and Moore received postcards postmarked New Zealand with a return address of Box 189, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The postcards contained cryptic messages referring to Reese's Pieces, the candy, and Suitland. Now, the two colleagues assumed that this was code language, but they never solved the mystery of the language. A few months later, in an apparent coincidence, Friedman asked Moore and Shandera to examine newly declassified Air Force documents at the National Archives repository in Suitland, Maryland. The head archivist was named Ed Reese, and so they started to put the language together. During their visit to the National Archives, Shandera and Moore discovered the Cutler-Twining Memo, dated July 14, 1954. It turned up in box 189. Recall the language on the postcards, box 189, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Now, the circumstances of the discovery of this memo has led most UFO researchers to see it as a deliberately planted document. The Cutler-Twining memo lacked, for instance, distinctive archive catalog numbers. Therefore, it appeared to be planted in some way. Admittedly, though, it would be very difficult to pull that off because of security protocols in place at the National Archives. Moore and Shandera were accused by some of a hoax, nevertheless. Now, Friedman defended them by noting that the Cutler-Twining memo was not a picture. It was on original onion skin paper, widely used by the government at that time. Subsequent research by skeptic Philip Klass, however, showed that Nathan Twining was actually out of the country at the time he supposedly wrote the Cutler-Twining memo. Nevertheless, today, some still defend it as one of the allegedly authentic Majestic 12 documents. Believe it or not, the story of the Majestic 12 document leaks gets even shadier and murkier than that. After those events, another UFO researcher and filmmaker, Linda Moulton Howe, was contacted by a man named Richard Doty. Doty worked for the AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He told Howe that the MJ-12 story was true and promised her film footage of an actual alien. Now, it turns out that Doty was a skilled disinformation agent. He's infamous in the UFO community for this episode with Howe and for feeding disinformation about UFOs to a person named Paul Benowitz, a physicist and inventor who lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
You know, one of the things that I find interesting, first of all, is I believe that name, Linda Moulton Howe. That sounds
Which
familiar.
name? Say it again.
Linda Moulton Howe?
I don't know the name.
It sounds like, I believe that was a name brought up either in the Robert Bigelow, Bob Lazar interviews or in a previous video that we've watched. But anyway, part of the reason that I wanted to pause is this sounds very much like something that, you hear. It's basically what got Joe Rogan to realize Alex Jones wasn't completely wrong about all this, about there being conspiracy things at least that are not covered in the normal news, is that not disinformation agents, but there were people at protests who would cause problems, agent provocateurs, right? And the idea is to basically change the outcome and change the dynamic of the situation, and they're basically almost like government shills. They're not really shilling anything, but they're paid by the government or some group in order to drive something into a desired direction. And it's basically sounds kind of like what this guy, he's a disinformation agent. His whole job is to make people think, why would you do that other than maybe for kicks, right? Just for the fun of it.
The document, yeah.
Why would you specifically, or he's saying there's a fake alien thing. This isn't the guys who found the memo, but this is the guy who Linda Moulton Howe was contacted about some kind of alien body, right? And this person who did it is a known hoaxer, I guess, or who's done this before. And so it seems as though there's at least enough of something. Either he's doing it just for fun, because he gets weird kicks out of it, or there's something actually there in this direction of, UFOs or whatever, something other than human, alien, something that is, they want people to look at it and think, oh, it's a hoax, oh, it's fake, oh, there's nothing there, oh, look at that example. That's a prominent example of, these people are just idiots for believing in aliens because there's,
Yeah,
here's this big example of that time that, everybody was fooled. They thought it was real and it was like just a guy messing with them. So, none of it's real. And
yeah,
it's like,
it's a similar phenomenon you see in intelligence communities happen in even like quote unquote real science too. Like
yeah,
it's a thought control technique.
exactly. Yeah, I think you call it narrative capture, right?
Yeah,
But it's like, it's not like the media trying to capture the narrative and like drive it some way. It's like, some group trying to subvert the truth by like making something seem less
derailing
plausible.
it. Yeah, derailing it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we can cover other content with that same phenomenon too.
Yeah, because I think it happens more often. Like I said, I basically believe that Joe Rogan went from not believing anything that Alex Jones had to say to believing like, okay, this guy is speaking more truth than most people give him credit for because he realized that, yeah, there are these, agent provocateurs that go to protests in, uh, black boots or whatever. I think it even happened in the George Floyd, supposedly George Floyd riots in Minneapolis, like the AutoZone that burned down, I think, or there's a video on the internet of some guy like wearing a gas mask and carrying an umbrella, just walking up and like breaking windows. And then when these protesters are like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" Like it's like clear that most of the protesters don't agree with what he's doing, and this guy is just there to cause trouble. And he looks like like he's almost semi dressed up in military garb, and it's like, what is he there to do? His face is covered. He's not, you know. People even attributed him to a police officer, and they like showed pictures, and it looks like actually it could be this police officer that they showed. So look that up. Look up the AutoZone
Yeah,
windows.
that's
But
another
anyway,
camera. All right,
it's just the idea of subverting a narrative.
Yeah.
Benowitz was fed a variety of stories by Doty about alien visitation and UFOs, and eventually Benowitz was literally driven insane. He had to be institutionalized at the end of his involvement with Doty.
I know what that's
The
like.
FBI eventually got involved and conducted their own
That's so funny.
investigation of the Majestic documents and this whole story. They, of course, believed that the documents were frauds. In 1996, a document called the MJ-12 Special Operations Manual was leaked. This manual was ostensibly about how to deal with crash retrievals and what to do with alien bodies. It was a set of protocols. In 1989, William Moore shocked the UFO community when he confessed at a MUFON conference, MUFON stands for the Mutual UFO Network, that he had begun meeting with Richard Doty as far back as 1981 for what he thought would be insider information from Doty in exchange for giving Doty information about members of MUFON. Now, this was before the first MJ-12 document leak. If he was meeting with Doty as far back as 1981, that precedes the leakage of these documents, which is highly suspicious. 1981 is also prior to what happened to Paul Benowitz. So Doty had already been involved in the UFO community in some very suspicious and sinister ways. And he was meeting with Moore, one of the three individuals who wound up getting access to the leaked Majestic documents. Again, the circumstances are highly suspicious. Moore partnered with Shandera, again, before the leaks, to produce a UFO documentary. So when we get the leak of the Majestic documents, for the very first time, it was a little more than convenient in light of all the things that were going on that the public only began to know about in 1989 with Moore's confession. Now, Moore's confession made him a Benedict Arnold in UFO circles, which is no surprise. It casts even more doubt, because of Doty, on the MJ-12 documents. Again, these documents are not obtained by Freedom of Information Act requests. They are all leaked in very suspicious circumstances by individuals that had a long and sinister history with planting disinformation and frankly lying to the UFO community. Now, in addition to the very questionable provenance of the Majestic documents, they have not done well under forensic linguistic testing. Now, forensic testing of a non-linguistic nature has produced more in their favor than the linguistic analysis. But a good forger could produce what looks like an authentic document. But you can't fake the linguistic testing that I had done on these documents several years ago. I say I because I am the person who initiated a forensic linguistic analysis of the Majestic documents. I solicited the help of Dr. Carol Chasky to test the Majestic documents in some very special ways. Dr. Chasky agreed to apply her cutting-edge computational methods on authorship attribution to a range of Majestic documents which included a signature. In other words, they had a named author. Now, to really proceed here, I have to explain a little bit about what authorship attribution means. How does it work? What exactly did Dr. Chasky do, and what are the implications for the Majestic documents? Authorship attribution is a means to test whether a document bearing a signature, again that would be claiming to have been written by a particular person, whether indeed that document was authored by that person. Now, Dr. Carol Chasky uses her methods to do this on a regular basis. She has tested authorship attribution on documents in hundreds of court cases. She literally makes her living doing this, and her methods and her results have to hold up in court. Now, what she did was she developed special software as part of her PhD program in computational linguistics. And she tests, using the software, written documents for certain patterns. Now, what she's not looking for is vocabulary. A dedicated forger could learn the vocabulary of the particular person that he wanted to forge a document and then have that, attributed to that person with, enough effort. For instance, if I was a forger and I wanted to forge a document and then make it look like a biologist wrote that document, I would be able to learn the language of that particular field, given enough time, again, given enough dedication. It's easy to sort of learn the lingo there and then use it to forge a document. That is not what authorship attribution looks for. What Dr. Chasky's software does is it looks for unconscious patterns. Words that we don't think about, like function words, prepositions, conjunctions. They are used no matter what field a person works in. Things like word order and syntax, even punctuation. These are all things that writers don't consciously think about, but that they use in patterned ways over the course of their writing. Now, procedurally, what we did was we took Majestic documents that had a signature, some author attributed to them. We digitized those, and then we digitized a group of known undisputed documents authored by the claimed author or authors. There were more than one author in what we tested. Now, the software will spot patterns in both the known and the unknown documents, again, these unconscious patterns, and then compare the known with the unknown documents. Now, in the paper that I authored describing the testing that we did and the findings that we achieved, I wrote this: the focus of this study is validation or falsification of the authorship attributions of the Majestic documents. As such, the scientific methods employed for this study cannot be used to validate the content of any of the Majestic documents whose authorship proves genuine. The computational methods of the research cannot determine the truth of written content. It can only determine whether or not that content was written by the attributed author. Refutation of attributed authorship would prove a document is a forgery, and so the content of that document would therefore be considered spurious. Now, we tested 17 Majestic documents in all.
So basically what he's saying is that it can't tell you whether the content of the documents is truth or not. It can only tell you whether the author is the person who is claimed to be or not. But you can take from that if it's not the actual author, it probably refutes what has been
Probably all
written.
bullshit in there.
Yeah, exactly.
All 17 had an attributed author.
Just so
Some
our
of these
audience
documents are among the most
is
explosive
aware.
in terms of their content. For example, they discuss extraterrestrial bodies at crash sites, that sort of thing.
I think our audience is smarter
Only
than we are,
one
probably.
They're all
of the
geniuses.
17 documents
course they
that
are.
we had tested by Dr. Chasky proved authentic. And interestingly
Wait, how
enough,
many proved
it was
authentic?
very innocuous when it came to content.
How many did he say proved genuine? Let's see.
In terms of their content, for example, they discuss extraterrestrial bodies at crash sites, that sort of thing. Only one of the 17 documents that we had tested by Dr. Chasky proved authentic. And interestingly enough, it was very innocuous when it came to content. It was not a document that had anything to do with alien bodies or crashes of UFOs or anything like that. So the final result of the linguistic testing that we had done is that the most explosive documents for whom authorship was claimed were bogus. Now again, this doesn't address documents that are part of the Majestic 12 series of documents that lacked an author. We couldn't test, we couldn't use authorship attribution on documents that don't claim an author. But some of the most explosive, the most interesting, and the ones that sort of this alien theory hangs on the most, did claim an author, and they were shown to be bogus. So where does all the information we talked about in this episode leave us? Well, the Majestic documents are far from a smoking gun for proof of a UFO alien conspiracy and cover-up. Their provenance is very suspicious, and linguistic testing point to them being frauds. Actually, there are more interesting documents when it comes to UFOs, and we'll get to some of those in other episodes. Thanks for watching
now I
Fringe
wanna
Pop
watch those
321.
episodes.
Yeah.
Please visit our website for source materials on this episode and others, and come back and watch again, because what you know may not be so.
What you know may not be so. I like that.
Yeah, I always enjoy watching his videos.
Yeah, so do I.
I feel like I learned a lot about the Majestic documents, like that whole origin story, like not just the specifics of this document that was interesting, but the phenomenon of like what you were saying, like an agent provocateur, like someone infiltrating the community to purposely lead them astray with bullshit is basically, that's a common theme in fringe topics. I mean, it is.
Yeah.
It's a common thing that, you know, the puppet masters, you know, whatever you want to call
You
it.
have to think there's reasoning behind it too.
Yeah, why did he do that? You know, did he just do it for fun? They said he spent like a decade like orchestrating.
Yeah.
Like it seems like it's more than for fun.
You get some
I
weird
don't know.
kicks.
Yeah, he really got his jollies going, I guess.
Well, like one thing I want to bring up is I think it's interesting that they tested it linguistically, and you know, probably if they had known like what it would have been put through, like that it would be tested linguistically, you know, they might have compensated for that, and you would have greater, like if they release documents now, and they might know, okay, this is going to be tested.
Yeah, they're better at forging it. This brings in the
Exactly.
entire idea of deep fakes. Like, it may not be just videos. It could also be things like this. Could be deep faked now with current technology.
Yeah, exactly. Like
And-
AI's creating like more accurate fakes of,
Yeah,
you know, forged documents.
AI narrative control, and I mean that's already happening. That's something else we should cover is AI narrative control, because that's already happening, and that's going to be an interesting one. Everyone should be aware of that.
You know, I think Elon Musk is literally just worried about AIs going wild and like controlling everything, and that's Terminator 2. Anyway, but I really enjoyed that. I like Michael Heiser. I think he, first of all, knows a lot about this because, like I said in the last episode, he's been on Coast to Coast AM. He's like part of the community. He seems to be someone who's level-headed and rational, who like wants there to be more behind the scenes or more going on, but he's 100% willing to like look into the truth of the like rational truth to see. And like I said in the previous video, it's like better if you invalidate what is fake and look for, you know, validate what's real than like to validate something fake or have like your argument hang on disinformation, because you
It
know
gets pulled out from under you.
exactly, it's like you're setting yourself up for a fall. And like I think a lot of the, you know, community is built on kind of lies.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather it be built on stuff that isn't, in the least, that isn't disprovable, like that you can't
I mean, or if it is disprovable, it's, you know, out of reach right now, you know.
yeah.
Eventually, we'll know more and more about everything going on here, especially when that UFO report comes out in June.
We'll at least know some like more documented cases. Hopefully, that's the idea. So, all right, well, that was super interesting. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Let us know what you think. You know, again, go like and subscribe. Like this video and subscribe to us and subscribe to Fringe Pop 321. Like, I love these and hope we can do more, watch more of these.
Yeah,
I'm almost
I
tempted
agree.
to just go through and watch a bunch, but I'd rather react, you know,
Yeah.
with you. And
One at a time, yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta take our time.
yeah. All right, well, I've been Matt,
But I'm Joel,
and we're FringeCraft.
See you
Later,
guys.
guys.